Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. All right, so welcome to the second episode of the It Is Taught podcast. This is for the 20th day of Kislev. And I just realized, and I can't believe I didn't realize this in putting together this podcast, but that this is a leap year, which makes this podcast all the more interesting because some of you might know this already, but basically when we study the Tanya, as I've mentioned previously, in previous episodes, the Tanya is divided up into daily portions so that we finish it throughout the course of a year. But when there's a leap year, then the portions are actually slightly different in order to accommodate that extra month that we have. So when there's a leap year in the Jewish calendar, there's an extra month of Adar. We have the first Adar and second Adar. And so that makes the year longer. So thus the sections need to be divided up slightly differently. So this is going to be an interesting journey for me because I was planning on using my entries, the summaries that I had written up to help me in preparing for this podcast and knowing what I was going to say. And those entries were not written for a leap year. So I'm going to be doing a little bit extra work for this. So I hope you guys appreciate that. And here we go. So for today's Tanya, we're still looking at approbation. So we're not actually getting into the meat of the text for another couple days, actually. So bear with this. It's a little bit still some, historical background. I hope you find it interesting. I thought it was pretty interesting, especially in doing a little bit of research around the subject. So in today's section, there's an approbation specifically from the Alter Rebbe's, the author of this book's three sons. And this approbation was written later. So the first approbation was written, the first few approbations that we looked at in yesterday's portion were written when the Tanya was first published. These were written several years later, after the Alter Rebbe actually passed away. So the Alter Rebbe passed away in the year 1812. And these approbations were written in the year 1814. And the reason for that is because the Alter Rebbe's three sons made a decision that they wanted to include two more sections in the Tanya. Those two sections that they wanted to include that weren't there previously were what is known as the Epistle of Holiness, the Iggeres HaKodesh, and then a subsection of that, which is called Kuntrus Achron, the final essays, basically. And interestingly enough, also as a side note, up until, I just learned this personally, so up until this point, the Tanya had been reprinted 7 different times, and never was it printed with the Alter Rebbe's name, with Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as the author. There was never an author ascribed to it. And only now in this next edition that was printed in 1814 was the Alter Rebbe actually attributed as being the author of the work. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the names of the three sons, in case you're curious, was Rabbi Dov Ber, who later became the successor to the Alter Rebbe. He was known in the Chabad Hasidic world as the Mittler Rebbe, the middle Rebbe. Then there was Rabbi Chaim Avram and Rabbi Moshe. So these were the three sons of the Alter Rebbe who gave their approbation to this new edition of the book. And specifically what they focused on was these two new sections, the Iggeres HaKodesh and Kuntrus Achron. And so just to, give a little bit of an explanation as to what these two sections are and why they decided to include them in the book. So Iggeres HaKodesh is a compilation of various letters that the Alter Rebbe wrote throughout his leadership concerning lots of different subjects, sometimes having to do with prayer, giving charity, for example. What else? Learning Torah, all kinds of different subjects. And the way that they're written up in the Tanya or compiled together in the Tanya is not in a chronological order. It's in a thematic order. So the sons of the Alter Rebbe actually took it upon themselves to compile these letters and divide them up thematically. And they give a little bit of a disclaimer here in their approbation. And they say that there are very few, while there were many different copies of these letters floating around throughout the Hasidic world, because the Alter Rebbe would write them to give guidance to his Hasidim, very, very few copies remained. And so those few copies that remained is what they used to compile this work. And so they give a slight disclaimer and they say, if you do notice that there are any mistakes in these copies, then you should just know that it's the mistake of the copier and it's not the mistake of the Alter Rebbe. So, so they're assuming they're giving the affirmation that the Alter Rebbe really knew what he was talking about and didn't make any mistakes in his work. And they explained that the reason why they're including these letters, these Iggeres HaKodesh, is because these letters often reference Likutei Amarim, which is the first section of the book, which was the only section of the book that was originally included in the primary printing of the book. And then the other section of the book, which is a subsection of this Iggeres HaKodesh, is called Kuntrus Achron. This comes at the very, very end of the Tanya. It's the last portion of the Tanya that we learn. And it's also made up of these letters, and it's very esoteric. So we'll see, God willing, we'll get there. That will take us about a year, hopefully. And once you get to that section, it's really, really, really difficult. It's really very esoteric. It makes a lot of Kabbalistic references. I'll try to the best of my ability to kind of break it down as best possible. And the reason why the sons of the Alter Rebbe thought that this section was important to include in the Tanya is because in those, what the Alter Rebbe basically does in Kuntrus Achron is he takes various parts of the Zohar, the Eitz Chaim, the Pri Eitz Chaim, all these different Kabbalistic works, and he points out a bunch of different seemingly contradictory things that are written there. And we'll get into the specifics of what some of those are once we get to that section, God willing. And he resolves the contradictions through the reasoning that is brought in the first book of Likutei Amarim. So basically, these sons of the Alter Rebbe felt that these three sections were really all interconnected. And so that's why they felt that it would be important to include these two other sections in the full publication of the book. So they don't make any mention to other sections that are in the book, such as Iggeres HaTshuva, the Epistle of Return, and also Shar Yechud VeEmunah, the Gate of Unity. But the sections they focus on here are these two sections of Iggeres HaKodesh and Kuntrus Achron, which were later included in the book. So I think that is everything that I wanted to mention about this section now. So that's it for today, and I'll speak to you again tomorrow. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.